On the morning of April 3, 2022, the body of 16-year-old Aaliyah Brooks was discovered near an abandoned concrete plant located on the outskirts of Denver, Colorado. The site had long been used as an illegal dumping ground, rarely patrolled and mostly frequented by teenagers. Her body was found partially concealed under debris, and initial impressions suggested blunt force trauma. Emergency responders declared her deceased at the scene. According to the forensic report, the cause of death was a combination of multiple blunt force impacts to the head and upper body, along with evidence of strangulation. Time of death was estimated to be between 8 p.m. and midnight the previous evening. There were no immediate signs of assault, and robbery was ruled out as a motive. Her phone and personal items were still in her backpack, located a few feet from the body. That changed 24 hours later, when a package was anonymously dropped off at the police station. Inside was a USB flash drive. The contents of the drive would change the course of the investigation completely. The video, recorded on a smartphone, showed Aaliyah surrounded by 4 teenagers, 3 males and 1 female. Over the course of the footage, which lasted approximately 6 minutes, the group could be seen verbally harassing and physically assaulting her. One of the individuals is heard laughing and saying, "She looks like she's in a horror movie. Look how she twitches." The footage ends abruptly, but not before showing Aaliyah collapsing. Her injuries appeared consistent with what was found during the autopsy. All 4 teenagers were identified within 12 hours of the footage being reviewed. 3 of them, Kyle Jennings, 16, Zach Holloway, 17, and Trevor Mills, 16, were students at the same public high school as Aaliyah. The 4th, Maya Reeves, 15, attended a neighboring charter school. Each of the suspects came from middle-class families with no prior criminal records. None of them attempted to flee. All were detained within 48 hours. During initial interviews, the suspects showed limited remorse. Investigators later testified that some of them referred to the event as a challenge and said they didn't think it would go that far. One of them described it as just something to do that night. The group had allegedly lured Aaliyah to the site under the pretense of filming a video project for school. Text messages recovered from her phone confirmed that she believed she was meeting Maya and a few friends to help record something for a class assignment. Denver prosecutors moved quickly to charge all 4 suspects. Because of their ages, the decision whether to try them as adults became a central legal issue. Ultimately, Zach Holloway and Kyle Jennings were transferred to adult court and charged with second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit assault. Maya Reeves and Trevor Mills remained in the juvenile system and were charged with aggravated assault and failure to prevent a violent felony. The court ultimately ruled that while the group did not set out to commit murder in the premeditated sense, their actions were grossly negligent and driven by a deliberate desire to harm. Plea agreements were reached in 3 of the 4 cases. Sentences ranged from 18 months in juvenile detention to 3 years in a youth correctional facility. None of them received life sentences or were charged with first-degree murder. Marcus did not speak to the media, did not attend the sentencing hearings, and made no public statement. Close acquaintances described him as completely shut down. What few people realized at the time was that Marcus Brooks had a military background. Aaliyah Nicole Brooks was born in 2006 in Denver, Colorado. She lived with her father, Marcus Brooks, in a modest 1-story home in the northeastern part of the city. Her mother, Denise Brooks, passed away from a stroke when Aaliyah was 11 years old. According to family members and school staff, the loss of her mother had a lasting impact, but Aaliyah remained focused and disciplined throughout her adolescence. Her father, Marcus, had served in the U.S. Army and worked post-service as a private security contractor, and later as an instructor in survival training for civilians and corporate clients. After retiring from that field in 2019, he took a quieter role as a night shift security guard. His schedule gave him time to be present in Aaliyah's life. Neighbors described him as private, but clearly devoted to his daughter. There was no history of criminal behavior or domestic disturbances associated with the household. Aaliyah was a quiet, academically strong student. She had no known behavioral issues and was described by multiple teachers as mature for her age and introverted but observant. In her free time, Aaliyah maintained a personal blog under a pseudonym where she wrote short essays about unsolved crimes, local urban legends, and what she called hidden dangers in plain sight. While her writing style was speculative and creative, there were entries that referenced real events, including school fights, bullying incidents, and suspicious behavior by students that she believed was being ignored. One entry, written a month before her death, read, "Some masks look too real. Sometimes the monster is sitting right next to you in class." The entry was never published, but it was found in her drafts folder. One of the more unusual elements of the case was the recorded video showing Aaliyah willingly accompanying the group of teenagers to the site where she was later murdered. In the footage, which was entered into evidence during the trial, Aaliyah appears calm and even smiling as she walks beside Maya Reeves and Kyle Jennings. There is no indication of fear or suspicion in her behavior. She does not attempt to leave or resist. Her body language is relaxed, and she seems to be under the impression that she is part of a planned activity. It raised the question, why would Aaliyah, known for her cautious and perceptive nature, voluntarily follow 4 individuals who later assaulted and killed her? Especially considering that at least 2 of them had previously been mentioned in her private writings as manipulative or aggressively fake. Investigators examined the group's communication history with her in the days leading up to her death. According to text message records recovered from her phone, Maya Reeves had contacted Aaliyah 2 days prior, asking for help with a video project for a school media class. The text read, "We need someone with your kind of brain, lol. Just help us set up the story, we'll do the rest." Aaliyah agreed, and arranged to meet them on April 2nd at 7:30 p.m. There was no indication in any of the messages that Aaliyah suspected anything unusual. The conversation was casual. She even messaged her father shortly before leaving, saying she would be back by 10. Further interviews with Maya Reeves revealed that the plan to lure Aaliyah was deliberate. In her initial statement, Maya claimed that she had no idea the situation would become violent and believed it was simply an experiment or group joke. Later, in a recorded testimony, she admitted that Kyle and Zach had expressed their intention to scare her a little and see how far they could push it. Maya did not notify anyone, nor did she attempt to warn Aaliyah. There was another detail that stood out to investigators. Trevor Mills, one of the suspects, was not known to Aaliyah before the incident. After the sentencing in the Aaliyah Brooks case, media coverage began to die down. Public attention, which had been intense and polarized during the trial, gradually shifted to other topics. 8 months later, on January 16, 2023, Kyle Jennings, one of the 2 defendants tried as an adult, was involved in a single-vehicle traffic accident on Route 287, about 30 miles outside Denver. According to the Colorado State Patrol, Jennings lost control of his vehicle at high speed. The car veered off the road and collided with a concrete barrier. He was extracted by emergency services and airlifted to a hospital. While he survived, the injuries were significant: multiple fractures, spinal damage, and long-term impairment of his left leg. An investigation into the accident revealed no signs of alcohol or drugs. However, a mechanic's inspection raised a red flag. The brake lines had ruptured. The damage was consistent with fatigue or possible tampering, but no definitive conclusion could be reached. Since the car was over 10 years old and had not passed a recent inspection, the incident was officially classified as a mechanical failure. No criminal investigation was opened. 3 weeks later, on February 7, 2023, another of the convicted teens, Zach Holloway, was found in possession of a large quantity of prohibited substances. The drugs were discovered during a routine inspection at his high school, where K-9 units were conducting a random search of lockers. Zach's locker contained over 50 grams of prohibited substances, as well as empty plastic baggies and a digital scale. Holloway was arrested on the spot and later claimed in his statement, "I've never seen that stuff before. Somebody set me up." Security footage from the school's hallway system did not show any unusual activity at his locker, but gaps in the surveillance coverage limited the analysis. Holloway's family hired a private attorney, who argued that the evidence was circumstantial. Nevertheless, due to his prior conviction, Zach was denied bail and remained in custody pending trial on drug possession and distribution charges. Shortly after Holloway's arrest, a third name from the original case resurfaced: Trevor Mills, who had received the most lenient sentence and was already back home under court supervision, was reported missing by his parents. According to the family, Trevor left the house on a Friday evening and did not return. His phone was switched off, and his last known location was traced to a commercial district near Interstate 70. Search efforts intensified after 24 hours, and he was found 2 days later in a rundown motel in Commerce City. When police located him, Trevor was disoriented, physically scratched, and experiencing signs of acute paranoia. Officers who responded noted that he was in a state of extreme agitation, claiming that he was being watched and followed. In an interview at the hospital, Trevor told social workers that someone had been leaking his private messages and photos online, including sensitive content from his teenage years. He alleged that the material had begun appearing on dark web forums and niche social media accounts. No direct evidence was found to confirm the digital harassment, but the psychological impact on Trevor was severe. He was placed under psychiatric observation for 2 weeks. His parents declined to speak publicly, but confirmed through legal representatives that their son had been suffering from panic attacks and insomnia since his release from juvenile detention. By the end of February 2023, 3 of the 4 individuals originally convicted in connection with Aaliyah Brooks' death had experienced severe and unrelated personal crises: a car accident, a drug charge, and a mental health emergency. Each incident, on its own, could be explained. But the timing, proximity, and connections between the individuals began to draw attention from a few within the Denver investigative community. One of those individuals was Laura Keene, a local journalist and crime analyst with a reputation for pursuing long-form investigative work. Keene published a short column in March 2023, noting what she referred to as a convergence of misfortune affecting those responsible for the Brooks killing. She did not speculate on intent, but questioned whether these events were truly coincidental. A few days later, she received an anonymous email. The message was short, with no attachments or metadata. It read, "Look at the father. He won't let this rest." Keene filed FOIA requests for Brooks' military background. Though partially redacted, the documents confirmed that he had served in a specialized psychological operations unit. His final years in service were spent training personnel in field interrogation, counter-surveillance, and psychological pressure. He was not a typical combat veteran. He had expertise in silent influence, disruption, and control. This context changed the nature of the investigation. Keene looked deeper into the incident involving Kyle Jennings, who had lost control of his car after a brake failure. A neighborhood tip about someone tampering with vehicles 2 nights earlier had gone uninvestigated. A post-crash analysis revealed the brake line was physically punctured, not corroded. No suspect was identified. In the prohibited substances arrest involving Zach Holloway, forensic technicians noted a packaging stamp on the bag, a thermal-coated mark typically used by military police evidence kits. These are not sold commercially. No one explained how such a bag ended up in a high school locker. Zach claimed the prohibited substances were planted. Trevor Mills' case added another layer. After his disappearance and hospitalization, he told staff that his private data, medical and personal, had been leaked online and sent to him via encrypted messages. The emails were routed through relay servers overseas, typical of techniques used in professional intelligence operations. Investigators found no digital breach of hospital systems, suggesting physical surveillance had been used instead. Each incident lacked direct evidence. There were no fingerprints, no confirmed sightings of Brooks, no digital trail. But Keene assembled the data into a timeline, and patterns began to emerge: consistent timing, high-stress tactics, and zero traceability. She contacted one of Brooks's former colleagues, who agreed to speak anonymously. He said, "If Marcus wanted someone to pay without touching them, he'd know how. He doesn't need weapons. He knows pressure points." Nearly a year passed after the sentencing in the Aaliyah Brooks case before Maya Reeves was mentioned in public reports again. Unlike the other 3, Maya had not faced any post-release incidents or legal problems. That changed in April 2023. On the morning of April 11th, Maya's mother reported receiving an unmarked package delivered to their home. The shipping label had no return address, and the parcel appeared to have been hand-delivered rather than sent through a courier. Inside was an old, worn porcelain doll with its face partially broken. Also included was a printed note. "You were the first to see it, and the last to apologize." Taped to the doll's back was a USB flash drive. The family turned the contents over to police. On the drive was a full, unedited recording of the night Aaliyah Brooks was killed, different from the 6-minute version used during the trial. This version included the lead-up to the attack, showing Maya interacting with Aaliyah in a way that strongly suggested prior coordination. The footage also showed Maya laughing along with the others and using her phone to record specific instructions given by Kyle Jennings. 2 days after receiving the package, Maya was voluntarily admitted to a psychiatric care facility. Her therapist later stated that she had experienced severe emotional regression and recurring panic attacks. Maya refused to speak with investigators after the incident. Her mother declined all interviews. The timing of the delivery and the contents of the message fit the pattern that journalist Laura Keene had already documented in her investigation. But unlike the prior events, which could still be written off as coincidence or unrelated bad luck, this delivery was unambiguous. It was a direct act of psychological confrontation. It suggested that someone had not only watched Maya, but had access to the full, original footage, something that had never been released publicly or shared with anyone outside law enforcement and the court system. The flash drive raised concerns about a data breach, but internal audits showed no evidence that the original file had been accessed through official channels. This led investigators to consider that a copy had been obtained during the trial, possibly from a legal office or through backdoor means. No suspect was named. The case was formally logged as an intimidation incident, but was not escalated further due to a lack of prosecutable evidence. On April 17, 2023, Laura Keene published a full-length feature article summarizing her findings from the past 6 months. The report, titled "Shadow Justice: How One Father Rewrote the Rules," laid out a timeline of the incidents involving all 4 teenagers and connected them to Marcus Brooks. She stopped short of accusing him directly but framed the article around the question: if the system won't balance the scale, what happens when someone decides to do it themselves? The article went viral within 48 hours. News outlets across the country picked it up. Online discussion split sharply. One side condemned Brooks as a vigilante who had gone rogue. The other praised him as a father who held the line when the justice system failed. The phrase, "second chance for them, no chance for her," became a popular refrain on social media. 2 days after the article's release, the editorial office that had published Keene's piece received a sealed envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed in clean, centered text were the words, "They were given a second chance. My daughter wasn't. And you still call that justice?" There was no signature, but it was clear who had written it. On July 2, 2023, Marcus Brooks walked into the Denver Police Department headquarters and identified himself. He had no attorney with him, and he did not resist arrest. Officers reported that he was calm and cooperative. When asked why he had come, he reportedly replied, "Because this part is done." He was not immediately charged with any violent crime. There were no active warrants against him. However, in the months leading up to his appearance, internal case files had been reopened in response to journalist Laura Keene's widely read investigation. These files documented a pattern of targeted psychological, reputational, and legal disruptions affecting the 4 individuals convicted in the death of Aaliyah Brooks. While none of the incidents had resulted in formal charges against Brooks, his sudden reappearance triggered an expedited review. Following consultation with the district attorney's office, Marcus Brooks was taken into custody for questioning related to several charges: unlawful surveillance, tampering with private property, dissemination of personal materials without consent, and criminal harassment. These were not felony offenses, but they carried potential sentencing under Colorado's criminal code. During the formal interview, Brooks did not confess to any specific actions. However, he also did not deny involvement. According to the transcript, when investigators asked if he was responsible for what happened to those kids, he answered, "They were responsible for what happened to my daughter. I didn't touch them. I just made sure they felt what they made her feel." The district attorney ultimately brought charges based on what could be proven. electronic harassment using burner accounts, illegal access to personal information, and property tampering in connection with the vehicle owned by Kyle Jennings. The court acknowledged that there was insufficient evidence to tie Brooks to the brake line damage directly, but circumstantial indicators, combined with his military background, made the case presentable to a jury. Brooks did not attempt to suppress the charges or seek a plea deal. His trial began in October 2023 and lasted just under 3 weeks. The courtroom was full for nearly every session. Members of the public, advocacy groups, and media outlets followed the proceedings closely. Brooks remained composed throughout. He did not contest the digital forensics presented against him and declined to call character witnesses. When given the opportunity to address the court directly during sentencing, he spoke without emotion. "I didn't act out of anger. I acted because the system finished its job and called it justice. But it wasn't. What I did wasn't revenge. It was a reminder, a message. I made sure that none of them could pretend it didn't happen." On November 2, 2023, Marcus Brooks was sentenced to 6 years in state prison. He was found guilty on multiple misdemeanor counts and 1 felony count related to unauthorized surveillance and targeted digital harassment. He showed no visible reaction as the sentence was read. By the time the sentencing hearing concluded, a petition for his clemency had already reached over 1.2 million signatures online. Supporters flooded state channels, urging the governor to consider early release or full pardon. In interviews after the trial, members of the victim advocacy community expressed concern about the precedent the case might set. One former prosecutor stated, "We cannot allow people to create their own courts just because the result wasn't emotionally satisfying. That's not justice. That's vigilantism." In prison, Marcus Brooks has declined interviews. According to correctional staff, he is quiet, compliant, and spends most of his time reading and writing. His legal team has filed no appeals. When asked by one of his attorneys whether he regretted anything, he is reported to have answered, "No. I regret that I had to do it, but not that I did."